Hi, I'm Jen, and welcome to Christian Fire Poppy. If you haven't heard yet, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints just had a big, momentous milestone day on February 13th, 2023. They placed the spire on top of the Salt Lake Temple, and they called it a milestone. And now this was really exciting in and of itself, especially as I've been watching and thinking about the symbolism of the Salt Lake Temple renovation and various analogies that I can liken to myself and my own spiritual growth. But it was very interesting when I looked into this and I found that a big Catholic cathedral in Paris, France, Notre Dame, had their spire placed on the same day, and they refer to it as a milestone day as well. So let's take a look at these double spire milestone events. As we continue on, we're going to look at that in the context of symbolism that we've been talking about, the parade of events in the heavens and on the earth that we're seeing, and how the Lord is possibly preaching sermons and some big things that are happening exactly 99 years from a historic dedication of South America by Elder Ballard. All right, so on February 13th, 2024, we have the momentous milestone. So here's the headline. It says Salt Lake Temple renovation reaches new heights as last of tower spire structures is placed. So this was celebrated. This had some 800 construction team members attend this big celebration. They call it the topping out ceremony, the placement of the final reinforcing steel pyramid atop the iconic house of the Lord. And you can see here on Fox News, they say Salt Lake Temple reaches milestone as final spire reinforcement placed. So it's kind of interesting because the temple site of Salt Lake Temple was dedicated on February 14th, 1853 by Heber C. Kimball, and the groundbreaking ceremonies were presided over by Brigham Young, who laid the cornerstone on April 6th of that year. So kind of interesting that on February 13th, the day before that anniversary, they're celebrating the placement of this final spire. So Joshua Fenn, the VP project executive, has a post where he explains why this occasion is so momentous, and you can read that on the Temple Square's Facebook post. But I listened to it, and he talked about how this was the final piece of steel that's being placed. And from here on out, all of the construction members really look forward to putting up those exterior, more beautiful pieces of the temple. So that main structure of the temple has been complete. So how fascinating that on February 13th, 2024, we have a big milestone spire being completed on the Notre Dame Cathedral. So here you can see on this headline, it says, Phoenix from the flames as fire wrecked Notre Dame Cathedral's new spire is revealed as featuring golden rooster and cross. So they're calling this a phoenix type golden rooster and cross because the cathedral burned down, hence the need for the renovation. So it says that Notre Dame's cathedral's new spire has been revealed as a golden rooster and cross after, like a phoenix, rising from the flames of the devastating fire in 2019. So there was a big fire in 2019 that destroyed it. Marking a milestone in its reconstruction, scaffolding from the top of the Gothic cathedral has been removed. It says Notre Dame's new spire revealed in Paris, marking again that idea of this being a milestone for the Catholic Church. So, of course, I had to dive into spire symbolism. And as you look back in time, Brigham Young made it clear that of the 6 spires on the Salt Lake Temple, the 3 on the east represent the First Presidency and the Melchizedek priesthood. The 3 spires on the west, which are slightly lower, represent the presiding bishopric and the Aaronic priesthood. Wilford Woodruff also said, "The temple is a symbol. The temple itself was to be a symbol," said Wilford Woodruff, with the completion of the temple in Salt Lake City, whose very appearance is a symbol of purity and peace, whose existence is a witness of the favor and power of God. The work of temple building by the saints does not cease. So on February 13, we have this double spire milestone. So I, of course, had to investigate what else was happening in the Catholic Church and in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints around the same time of the spire being placed. Well, if you look, February 13th is right before February 14th, and February 14th is Valentine's Day, and it's also Ash Wednesday, and there were significant things that happened in both the Catholic and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on February 14th as well. So on February 14th, the Catholic Church cleans house, you might say, with scandalous bishop resignation the day after the Phoenix spire is placed. So that's kind of interesting on the day that they have a phoenix being placed, which represents rising from the ashes, and this is on Ash Wednesday. And on February 14th, President Nelson gives rare Valentine's Day message about loving God and your neighbor. And in this message, he uses the word love 7 times. And this is a theme, a pattern, as he has been highlighting his messages by repeating that key word 7 times. So a little bit of background on the Catholic Church. So the Catholic abuse scandal news spread like fire, exposing long hidden corruption. So this has been going on for the last few years, and it feels like they're just starting to finish taking care of this problem, from what I can tell. Here's some headlines. So CBS News says the blaze on April 15th, 2019. So this is the fire that burned down the cathedral. It exposed iron staples used to hold the cathedral's stone blocks together. Some appeared in the frame, others fell smoldering to the ground in the heat of the blaze. So it says here, fire that engulfed Notre Dame's cathedral exposes long hidden. So this kind of interesting analogy of the fire exposing something that's long and hidden. Then at the same time, you have France's Catholic Bishops' Conference agreed to provide reparations after a 2021 report estimated some 330,000 children were sexually abused over 70 years by priests or other church-related figures in France. So you have this really terrible, long hidden scandal that is being exposed. It's kind of reminded me of the scripture where it talks about the abominations that were spied in the land and that needed to be put away. And so luckily, this terrible thing was exposed, and this is one of those terrible things that casts a shadow on a church and makes it look bad. But there are so many good Catholics with good hearts that just want to serve God and love and do service. And so it's really a sad thing when you have corruption like this that is going on and it's not addressed. And it's really sad to those who are not a part of that at all. So on February 14th, 2024, this was also Ash Wednesday. Now, Ash Wednesday is a Christian holiday, and it's 40 days leading up to Easter. So it's a way to prepare and to think about Easter in advance. So looking at February 14th, this was the day after the Phoenix Rooster spire was placed. It says, Church in France news. Amid scandal, Strasbourg Auxiliary Bishop resigns for quote-unquote health reasons. Pope Francis accepted the resignation Wednesday of a 51-year-old French auxiliary bishop. But while the local church has insisted Bishop resigned for health reasons, the bishop was also engulfed by a scandal surrounding the Paris Foreign Mission Society. And as I read about this, he was not implicated as being guilty, but as in someone who was silent and did not step up and speak up, which is not okay in the case of the safety of children. So this is on February 14th. So we have this imagery of the phoenix rising from the ashes, cleaning house, starting new, and maybe this marks a new era for the Catholic Church, that they will move up, and a milestone for them to move on and clean house from that terrible scandal. So, is the Lord preaching sermons through holy architecture and Valentine's Day, Ash Wednesday? Well, Paris France Cathedral burned to the ground at the time of the huge scandal, and then the next day, on the 14th, you have the scandalous France bishop resigns after the spires are placed, and Salt Lake City is renovated at a time that President Nelson is trying to get the saints to leave behind Pharisaical rules, the idolatry of box checking, to rise up, take up wings into higher and holier ways of thinking and worshiping God. So by saying this isn't a judgmental, shameful thing to members of the church. It's more of the idea that the church is continually being restored and growing, and our prophet has done a really great job of that over the past 7 years, trying to get us to think and be and act in higher and holier ways. And I felt like his message on February 14th was like a capstone to what he's been trying to do for the last words. If you were to pick a scripture of what he's trying to get the church to embody through all of these higher and holier changes, it's a lot of taking out the individual Pharisaical rules and getting us to focus on our relationship with Jesus Christ, and to love God and to love our neighbor and to prioritize that. So I really feel like this Valentine's message is a capstone, and it's perfect to be given right after the spire of the Salt Lake Temple is placed. This capstone message where he uses the word love 7 times after the spires are placed. So go onto Facebook and read what President Nelson said, and he uses the word love 7 times. So here in Church News, it says, President Nelson details plans for Salt Lake Temple. So the Salt Lake Temple will close December 29th and remain closed. They're planning for 4 years, but now it won't be completed till 2026. So it's kind of interesting that in 2019, the renovation of the Salt Lake Temple was begun. And if you look at the Catholic Cathedral, it burned down in 2019. All right, so on these 2 commandments hang all the laws and prophets. So in Matthew 28:37, Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all of the laws and the prophets. So this perfect message is in sync with the spires being placed. And the spires are a symbol of the first presidency and the Melchizedek priesthood. The 3 spires on the west, which are slightly lower, represent the presiding bishopric and the Aaronic priesthood. So Valentine's Day, also Ash Wednesday milestone events on December 14th, 2024. This was the anniversary of the first milestone of the Salt Lake Temple, the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple, and this was exactly 171 years ago on February 14th, 1853. So I love the symbolism here. It's ripe with symbolism. The spire being placed on the top, the message with 7 loves. And if you want to see that message and learn more about it, go to Christian Homestead's video where he talked about it. He did it again, President Nelson's 7s, and he goes into and will review with you all the different message that President Nelson has used the word, a specific word, 7 times to highlight kind of the meat of his message. So I found this really interesting. If we're looking at this as a big milestone day for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Catholic Church, I found this pretty interesting. This is what I found on Starium, that you can go check this out, but celestial asteroid art on February 14th, 2024. So the Ash Wednesday countdown to Easter to mark the Spire Milestone Day. And now you might not think anything of this. Perhaps this is just celestial art that can captivate our minds and help us remember what happened on this date. But I thought this was really cool. If you go to Starium on February 14th, 2024, and you can see right here, this looks like a temple. like a tabernacle. And here at the top of the spires, you have the asteroid Francis and the asteroid Nelson Eric. So if we think of President Nelson, and the meaning of the word Eric actually means sole ruler. So the sole ruler of the world, or the prophet of the world. And we have these spires being placed atop the temple. And we also have the asteroids called Temple and Israel right next to it. So how cool is that? All right, so I'm going to show you live on Starium how cool this looks. So right here we have the asteroid America. We look up Francis. This asteroid was specifically named after Pope Francis. Here, the top of the spire. We have President Nelson, Nelson Eric, or Nelson Soul Leader. Have the top of another spire. And then we have our asteroid Temple and Israel. There you go. All right, so if we're calling this spire on top of the temple a milestone event, I would like to take a look at it in the context of all of our other milestone events that have happened over the past 7 years, seeing as we're about to hit the 7-year eclipse mark. So on September 23rd, 2017, I see this as the beginning of the 7-year signs. So on that day, there was a general women's conference, and there was a Revelation 12 sign in the sky. So the woman in the heaven getting her wings to save her from the serpent is kind of the basis of that message. Sorry, that was my 7-year-old daughter bursting in. So the Revelation 12 sign kind of has this theme of the woman representing the church getting her wings to save her from the serpent. So in my mind, I kind of look at these 7 years as a time of preparation where the church is getting our wings, the higher and holier changes that are preparing us for whatever is coming in the next few years of our future. So, and then after that, you have in Revelation 12:15, it talks about the flood pouring out from the serpent's mouth. So I'm hoping we're not going to see a flood pouring out from the serpent's mouth in the future, but it might be inevitable. We began the process of getting wings. So we had the Revelation 12 sign, and then right after that, on August 21st, 2017, we have the first of the Great American Eclipses. This was also President Monson's birthday. Soon after that, President Nelson became the prophet of the church, and he started to institute the higher and holier ways of the church. We had the new ministering program, the change to 2-hour church, and higher and holier was mentioned in 11 different talks at that time. And then in 2020, we had our Hingepoint events. We had the 200th anniversary of the Restoration, the Holy Hosanna Shout, the Bicentennial Proclamation to the world. This was a monument of words. A new worldwide church symbol was given. You can see it on the left. Christ standing in an arched doorway. This is a depiction of him standing kind of in the doorway of the temple and also of the resurrection coming forth out of the tomb. So a perfect symbol to think about as we are now just shy of 40 days from Easter. We also had the beginning of COVID times, where President Holland referred to this as a plague of biblical proportions. We had Elder Gong talking extensively about the Passover, Palm Sunday, and the Kirtland Temple. And separate speakers mentioned the Kirtland Temple. So a lot of talk about temples. And then we have the youth get wings too. So in October of 2022, Elder Uchtdorf introduces the new For the Strength of Youth pamphlet and says that he is calling us to follow him in higher, holier ways. So again, the minimizing the specific nitty-gritty rules and really focusing on our relationship with Jesus Christ. Then we had what I found, which I thought was significant, which it looked like a Revelation 12 sign, and it was right before the October eclipse in 2023. So you can see this video I did previously, and I highlight the Revelation 12 scriptures where it talks about a sign in heaven in the likeness of things on the earth, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars, and she's giving birth, travailing to give birth. And you can see here there was an asteroid child right in the place of giving birth, and we also have, again, this Nelson Eric asteroid right here, and Pope Francis asteroid up here, along with a lot of other interesting ones that I talk about in that video. So the Revelation 12 sign was followed by the August 2017 eclipse, and then you also have the Revelation 12 sign right before the October 2023 eclipse. So with all of this talk of spires, the spire is the highest point, and we have at the top of that spire of our temples, we have angels, and in the Catholic Church, they have birds. So this idea of wings and birds and height and views and flying and being given wings. So I've been thinking a lot about this scripture that says, "For as the light of the morning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, and covereth the whole earth, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." And we actually know in a previous video, I pointed out how President Nelson actually included in his footnotes the scripture that talks about the sign of the Son of Man. And that was, I believe, 1 or 2 years ago. You'd have to look at my previous videos. But the next part of the scripture says, "I shew unto you a parable. Behold, wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles," and it's also translated as vultures, "be gathered together. So likewise shall mine elect be gathered from the four quarters of the earth." And this reminds me of this idea when President Nelson said, "I call upon you to become the people of the second coming, the people who are able, ready, and worthy to receive the Lord when he comes again, the people who have already chosen Jesus Christ over this fallen world, the people who rejoice in their agency to live the higher, holier laws of Jesus Christ. I call upon you, my dear brothers and sisters, to become this righteous people." So in my mind, I hear our prophet telling us to take up our wings and fly and rejoice in the higher, holier laws. All right, so this was fascinating when I found this. So in 1925, exactly 99 years ago, remember all the 99s having to do with the eclipse and also being tied into Abraham and the covenant to gather and multiply exceedingly. So we have the historic Argentina dedication of all South America for the gathering of Israel. So you can see here, the Buenos Aires Argentina Temple. It was the fourth temple built in South America and the first to be built in Argentina. So Elder Melvin J. Ballard of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles made a historic visit to Buenos Aires on Christmas Day in 1925 to dedicate all of South America for the preaching of the gospel. And so I looked up what was happening with temples in Argentina and Chile, because Argentina and Chile, my previous videos, I talked about this interesting connection. Argentina is connected to Pope Francis. That's where he was born. We had some lightning events. And in Chile, this was President Nelson's first temple that he dedicated as a prophet. But I think this was a new discovery to me to see how Argentina has a special link to our church in the sense that this was the location of the dedication of the preaching of the gospel to go forth. So right now we currently have 2 temples under construction and 1 that has been announced. So 3 more temples are coming to the Argentina, making that a total of 6. And here in Chile, we have 1 that's under construction and 2 that were just announced. So making that a total of 5 temples in Chile. So that's pretty cool. So we have 99 years from the dedication, the second of 2 eclipses, and it crosses over Chile and Argentina. And then we have those 6 temples coming soon. Well, 6 and 5 temples. So the year of 99. So when Abram was 99 years old, this is the time when he covenanted, and the Lord covenanted with him to multiply him exceedingly. And here we have all these exciting new changes, new mission presidents being called, and just this kind of feeling that growth is coming. All right, so let's take a look at all of these events in a timeline from 2017 to 24. So we have these kind of bookends or a sandwich of events, 7 years of eclipses. We have the 2 US and 2 Chile and Argentina eclipses, 2 Revelation 12 wing signs, and 3 Feast of Trumpets holidays. So here we have the eclipses starting here all the way to here, the Great American Eclipses. Then right after that was the first Feast of Trumpets, Revelation 12 signs. So I look at this as beginning of the church getting our wings with higher and holier ways, all the way to the next Revelation 12 sign, which was right over, let's see, right over here. There we go. Took me a minute to find that. So on September 18th, we had the Revelation 12 sign, and this was actually an asteroid. This said meters, but I meant asteroid. So the child was born, we had that asteroid, and this was the day after Feast of Trumpets. So both this Revelation 12 sign and this Revelation 12 sign were on the day before the Feast of Trumpets, and then our third Feast of Trumpets date is actually on the same day as a full annular solar eclipse over Chile and Argentina again. So we actually have 2. I had talked about this Chile and Argentina Hingepoint eclipse. This is the exact midday between the first and the last Great American eclipses. So this is day 1211, this Hingepoint eclipse, and the exact midpoint between the 2 Great American eclipses on this day. The Electoral College basically confirmed that Biden would be president along with Kamala Harris as VP. So at this event, how interesting that it's crossing over the same location again on October 7th on the first day of the Feast of Trumpets. So pretty interesting stuff. And here we had the Chile Temple dedication. And over here, we have this Spire's Milestone for the temple and the Catholic Cathedral. And then we had President Nelson and Pope Francis meet. So this Hingepoint event where the prophet met with the Pope. And we had the Rome temple dedication, which he referred to this time as a Hingepoint time. And we also had all of these things, all of those 2020 events. And of course, the 1290 days from when the temple shut down and the October 7th Israel attack. So as I was pondering on all these connections and things that have been happening, I was just thinking, wow, the second coming could be very soon. I do not think it's 50 or 100 years away at all, not even close. I think it's much sooner. For all we know, it could be tomorrow, could be in who knows. But as I was thinking about these things, I was driving and I saw this beautiful rainbow. And I was pondering on this timeline and signs and the February 14th connections and symbols and the temple and the second coming, and this beautiful rainbow appeared. And this picture does not do it justice. It was so much more pretty. Apparently, it's hard to take good pictures of rainbows. So that was on February 15th. So I thought I'd share that. Something else that was interesting as I was looking at events on February 14th, not only did we have those great things and talks, messages of love, but we also had some disturbing warning signs from the world. So on February 14th, we have our Russia space nuclear threat. So basically, we had the head of the US in charge of, safety talk about how this space nuke threat, the possibility is that it would destroy satellites and would demolish our GPS and cripple our transportation systems. It would wreak havoc in a lot of different ways if Russia were to detonate a nuclear bomb up in space. And I threw this up here. I had shared this at the very beginning when I was on Jared Homestead. I had shared something about basically on October 9th, 2022, an experience I had, just kind of explaining some of my motivation that I feel like I'm able to notice interesting patterns and things. And I was very much aware of what was going to happen in 2020 before it did. It was almost like a practice. And I felt like, wow, I should have spoken up, and maybe if I had warned and talked about it more, it could have helped people to be more prepared. And I feel like we have times like that that are coming ahead of us again. And so at this time, I just kind of took this thought to the Lord, and I feel like He has helped me and just helping me to just put that out there and to share my thoughts and to help people get prepared. And on November 21st, 2022, I shared this and I felt prompted to actually share this. Now, I have a lot of dreams that I do not share, and usually I don't feel prompted to share them, but sometimes I feel like I do. And this was one of them. I said, I just had an important dream this morning before waking. There were 3 red orbs flying in the sky that looked like classic UFOs. So, kind of the thought that they were up in space. Then, as they were flying in the sky, 2 of them joined together. Then, all of a sudden, there were hundreds of USA military planes buzzing around them. But the UFO that had gone from 2 to 1 suddenly went invisible. So the planes, but I could still see it, and it changed into the form of a giant bat. So the USA planes started flying crazily, and I knew that our planes were no match for this invisible bat that was going to literally spank them, and then the dream ended. And so I just commented that I felt like they were UFOs to portray them as enemies to the USA, so Russia and China joining forces. And anyways, I had texted this to Jared, and something that I've been watching for is this idea of Russia and China having technology that would be really bad for our airplanes. And this idea of our airplanes flying crazily is kind of interesting because we have some of the largest NATO exercises going on right now. So these are some of the headlines about this space nuclear threat warning. So GOP warning of national security threat is about Russia wanting nuclear weapon in space. Officials sound alarm about new Russian space threat. Russia space nuke. The national security threat panic is a reminder of one important way the US has fallen behind. And Russian nukes in space, why the intelligence leak might be more serious than the threat itself. And we also have NATO begins largest exercise since Cold War. So when I saw all of this happening and all the other connections I made on February 14th, I feel like this just really reminded me of that dream that I had. So, which to me, the purpose of sharing that is just it's a wake-up call, it's a warning. Let's pay attention to the things that are happening in the world and not stick our heads in the sand, but get prepared spiritually first and foremost, and temporally. All right, now I'm going to share. This is where things get really weird. So, my Valentine's connections observed. This was just so weird. So, you can see here on the right, this is a screenshot. This is what I was looking at on my phone right before I fell asleep on Valentine's Day at 1 a.m. So, right as I was going to sleep, I just had this thought that I wanted to look up the origins of Valentine's Day. Like, where does Valentine's Day come from? And I took a screenshot of this, and it says, therefore, Chaucer invented Valentine's Day as we know it today. At the time of Chaucer's writings, February 14th also happened to be considered the first day of spring in Britain because it was the beginning of birds' mating season, perfectly appropriate for a celebration of affection. In fact, Chaucer's The Parliament of Fowls is all about birds gathering to choose their mates. So this kind of blew me away because I was thinking all about this bird, angel, spire symbolism. And then I thought, oh, how perfect that Valentine's Day, traces back to the same symbolism of birds. So, number one, we're going to look at how the spires are topped with angels and birds are synonyms for angels, winged creatures. So, number two, we have Valentine's Day history linked to birds. That was an interesting point. And we also have that February 14th was the parallel day of the Duke of Ferdinand's assassination starting World War I. So the reason I say that is that if you count the number of days before the World War I eclipse, interestingly enough, that was on August 21st, which our eclipse, first Great American Eclipse, is also on August 21st. But if you count the days from when the Duke of Ferdinand was assassinated. This is considered to be kind of the flashpoint of World War I. It would be February 14th on our calendar from the Great American Eclipse. So February 14th, we have the second in command to Putin talks about birds and assassination of a French leader. So it's so weird because I'm laying here looking at the history and I'm thinking about how tomorrow is also the parallel day of the Duke of Ferdinand's assassination if you're looking at it in the time frame of parallel eclipse events. And then, oh my gosh, to see that Russia comes out with an official statement talking about birds and assassinations. It was kind of crazy. But first, let's take a look at, just because it's interesting, a little snippet from the 699 lines of Parliament of Fowls, the origins of Valentine's Day. It says, on every bough I heard the birds sing, angelic voices in their harmony. This book of which I make mention low, entitled was, as I shall quickly tell, 7 chapters it had on heaven and hell, and earth and the souls that therein dwell. Fowl, heed my judgment now, I pray. You know that on St. Valentine's Day, by my statute and through my governance, you come to choose and then fly your way, but nonetheless my rightful ordinance. And if that I be found to her untrue, I disobey or am blindly negligent, boastful or in time chase after new, I pray to you on me be this judgment, that by these fowls I be all torn then, the very day that she should ever find I am false to her or wilfully unkind. Then it tells how from a starry place his grandfather had him Carthage shown, and told him in advance of all his grace, who loves the common good and virtue too, shall unto a blissful place yet wend, there where joys that last without an end. Then he asked if folk that had died here have life and dwelling in another place, and his grandfather said, have no fear, and that our present world's brief space is but a kind of death whose path we trace. Fowl, heed my judgment now, pray I. You know that on St. Valentine's Day, by my statute and through my governance, you come to choose and then fly your way, but nonetheless my rightful ordinance. Now, this was definitely me chopping up this Parliament of Fowls, but I wanted to just give you a few verses to give you a taste. But go and read it and think about where Valentine's Day came from. Oh, I fully recognize it's very random, but just the randomness of how these symbols keep popping up and I'm noticing them. All right, so, but honestly, this parallel right here is so weird. So this gives you a visual of what happened before World War I and what is happening now. So on June 28th, 1914, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and this was on June 28th, 1914, which eventually led to the outbreak of the First World War. And then if you count 54 days from the August 21st, 1914 eclipse, you get June 28th, 1914. So 54 days between the assassination and the eclipse. And then you look at today, I've kind of been thinking a lot about how this eclipse is linked to the upcoming global war and looking for parallels. So on February 14th, 2024, this was 54 days before the April 8th, 2024 eclipse. So I was looking for parallel events, and I found it really odd that the Russia official statement was about birds, think about the Parliament of Birds, and that the EU and US, as them being the birds, and the assassination of the leader of France. So let's take a look at what he said. So Dimitri Medev. So Medvedev is second only to Putin. Putin used to be the top prime minister. It's now Putin, but Medvedev is his right-hand man. And this is what he said on Valentine's Day, on this parallel assassination day. So Macron, who is the president of France, he says Macron seems to have been so scared of a real or presumed assassination in Nazi Kiev that not only has he canceled his trip there, but also decided to share the nuclear capacity with other Europeans. Sure, such trifles as a nuclear non-proliferation treaty are of no concern to him. The Rooster of France holds it above everything else to first crow loudly, thus attracting attention of all the European henhouse. Clearly, the head poultry farmer from across the ocean would immediately castrate the horse Rooster of France, and the Paris capon would then go on peacefully pecking the grain from the master's hand. In essence, all the nuclear capacity is run by Washington. Yet, the Gaelic rooster's piercing scream has been counted. It awakened the poultry house. The poultry house became alarmed, and Macron has once again reminded everyone. All right, so kind of interesting because a weird tie-in to February 14th. If you read the whole Parliament of Fowls, it's about actually the birds being different people in society and fighting over this eagle. Anyway, so you'll just have to read it. But we had here that Medvedev is second only to Putin, and he talks of the assassination of Macron, the president of France, on February 14th. So this parallel day to Ferdinand assassination, World War I start day when counting from the eclipse. So all these weird coincidences, what do I take away from it? I just see it as a sign and a warning that we see signs and warnings. You don't even need to notice this. These are kind of random, weird, interesting coincidences, but just take a look and logically look at what's happening. Do a little research, spend a little time, and see how there are warning signs all around us in the news from all the countries. In fact, it doesn't feel like almost every other country is warning their citizens to get ready for a global war. We have China and Russia and Finland, and anyways, there's a whole list of countries that are warning about this. All right, and I took a look at Starium to see what else was happening. I noticed that there was, on February 14th, a Jupiter-Moon conjunction. So you can see it right here, Jupiter and the Moon right next to each other. Jupiter oftentimes is a symbol of Jesus Christ, as is the Moon, and you here kind of have leading out of this kind of parade of signs of the stars lining up to look like the nations, lining up on the world stage to play their part. So signs of coming global contact, I would say conflict, because you have Russia, you have China here, and I didn't include that. China's on there as well, but you have Argentina, Russia, Paris, France, Sun, Mercury, Chile, Venus, Mars, Pope Francis, President Nelson, America, the United Nations, and maybe this is just an imaginative piece of art that reminds us of what is actually happening in the world, but I did think it was kind of cool looking. And what I want the main takeaway of this whole kind of random message of this video is just to share some things that are kind of interesting, but also what I want the main takeaway to be is that February 14th was Ash Wednesday, and that is 40 days before Easter. So this is your 40-day wake-up call, because remember last year how the prophet and apostles really highlighted the importance of Easter. So let's be obedient to that wake-up call, and let's review really quickly what they had to say. So the first presidency's letter caught my attention, and it caused me to reflect on the way our family has celebrated Easter through the years. The more I thought about our celebrations, the more I found myself wondering if we are inadvertently shortchanging the true meaning of this holiday, so central to all believers in Jesus Christ. So here we have, he says, but the first presidency letter was a wake-up call. Not only did they invite all of us to make sure our celebration of the most important event ever happened on this earth, the atonement and resurrection of Jesus Christ, includes the reverence and respect the Lord deserves, but they also gave us more time with our families and friends on Easter Sunday to do so. These words of the prophet Joseph Smith add additional context to the significance of the events surrounding Easter. Fundamental principles of our religion are the testimony of the apostles and prophets concerning Jesus Christ, that he died, was buried, and rose again on the third day, and ascended into heaven, and all other things which pertain to our religion are only appendages to it. So this was the last April 2023 General Conference, called The Greatest Easter Story Ever Told. And this is central to everything. So sometimes in these videos, I bring up these tiny little details and these little clues that are interesting, but really in my mind and heart, they're almost like entertainment. They're little clues. So I don't recommend drawing any extreme conclusions from any of this or taking any extreme action, but more just looking at interesting tidbits that focus us on what we know to be true. So keeping all of these pieces of information in their correct priority. So focusing on Jesus Christ, loving God, loving our neighbors, listening to the counsel of the prophet and apostles, reading the scriptures, reading the Book of Mormon, and going to the temple. These are really exciting days and times that we live in. And it's crazy and confusing and chaotic. But know that as we focus our hearts on our Savior Jesus Christ, that He will hold our hand through all of it. So thanks for joining me today on Christian Fire Poppy Channel. Let's bloom despite the doom and gloom like true fire poppies. A Zion field of many fire poppies will reduce erosion after fires. Join us for more fiery passion and preparedness as we fly into the second coming of Jesus Christ.